Because I live in Iowa, visiting.
Okay.
From Catholic Mobilizing Network.
Oh.
Just downstairs.
Okay. All right.
Little Friends for Peace.
Mm-hmm. Yay! Lots of little friends in the house. Yay! And Jerry. Okay.
Little Friends for Peace as well.
All right. Miss J. So many hats, right? So many hats. All right. All right, St. Matthews. Okay. 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 And other Pax Christi staff. That's right. Raise your hands. Okay. So can we go? All right. All right. And my name is Charlene Howard. I'm the executive director for Pax Christi USA. And this is the most fun job I have ever had in my life. This is where I'm supposed to be. So this is the dream job. So it can happen, right? It can really happen. God is good. And so we are delighted to have Jim here with us today. Jim is a member of Pax Christi. He is a member of our Nuclear Disarmament Working Group and currently a co-convener of that working group with Nick Melee, who founded the group originally. And so we are just ecstatic that he could stop by Pax Christi USA on his grand tour to to share about his book Atomic Pilgrim. I had the pleasure of reading it, and so did Michelle, and we were blessed to be able to contribute to with some comments on it. But I am telling you, it is fascinating and it is a worthwhile read. So we're going to have Jim tell us all about his story, about that story, and I'm sure some of the other pilgrims who are here with us will share and contribute to today's conversation. After he has had, and we've had some general discussion, there'll be time for questions that anyone would like to ask. And those of you who are watching on live stream, you can post your questions in the chat, and we will do our very best to give life to those questions as well. And so, with no further ado, I turn this over to Jim. There you go.
Thank you very much. So glad that all of you came today. So my book is Atomic Pilgrim. There's basically two main parts to it. The first is about the Bethlehem Peace Pilgrimage, and myself and 19 other people in 1982 walked across the United States about 15 to 20 miles a day. And then in 1983, we walked across Europe, starting from Cork, Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, and walked up through Northern Ireland, which was still very much involved in the Troubles. I stayed that whole week. We were walking through Northern Ireland with Protestant families, had many interesting, eye-opening conversations. Then we went over to Scotland, England, across France, Switzerland, and Italy, and then took a boat to Yugoslavia, which was still one country, and it was under communist rule. It wasn't part of the Warsaw Pact, so it wasn't like Soviet communism, but it was still communism and still under extensive police control. I remember writing my folks after landing in Dubrovnik and taking it down to the nearest post office and handing the attendant my letter to my folks. And he proceeded to get out a letter opener and slit open the envelope. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he told me in no uncertain terms, "This is not your country." And he read it, sealed it back up, and it sent it off. And I didn't know if it was going to be disappeared, but it did eventually reach my folks. We spent 6 weeks in Yugoslavia, but it was the only country we didn't really reach out to religious groups because of the religious persecution. We didn't want to endanger religious communities. And so we camped out most of the time in Yugoslavia. And then down into Greece, to Athens, took a boat from there to Haifa, walked to Nazareth, and then down the occupied West Bank through Nablus and Ramallah into Jerusalem. And on Christmas Eve, we walked the final 8 miles from Jerusalem into Bethlehem. A total of 6,700 miles, 20 months. And we ranged in age from 20 to 67. Our eldest member was Father George Zabelka, who during World War II, if you don't know, was the Catholic chaplain to the men who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And getting to know George, getting to know each of the 28 people in the core group was an amazing thing, but especially George. He, even though he didn't know about the atomic bombing before it happened, he felt a fair amount of guilt for just being involved and doing, the role of a chaplain is to bless and pray for the men going out on mission and when they come back. And he describes it as a worm that ate at him for years. And during the civil rights movement, during the 1950s and 60s, he was parish priest in Flint, Michigan, an all-black parish that the bishop there told George when he was assigned to the parish that I'm going to close you down in a couple of years. But George organized that parish. I'm not sure exactly the sequence, but eventually, even to the point of job training for people in the neighborhood. And others that I've read about George during those years, when the riots happened in the 60s in Detroit and other places, including Flint, he was the only white person who could walk the streets, and because he was so much a part of the community, so much recognized. He even was involved in the March on Selma. But during the 70s, he went to a couple of retreats by Father Charles McCarthy, and made a conversion to peace. He hadn't really grappled with Jesus' command to love your enemies. And it was through those retreats that he made the conversion to nonviolence and started giving workshops, just like Charlie did. And then I'm getting too many of the details maybe, but there was an interview of George in Sojourners magazine in September 1980. And a Jesuit priest in Seattle, Father Jack Morris, who was one of the co-founders of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, read it and had this surge of energy through his body saying, I'm going to walk to Bethlehem. Jack didn't really understand what that meant, but he wrote to George and thought that George was just going to pass it off as a crazy idea. But a few days later, George calls Jack and says, I'm going with you. And then through the grace of God, and Steve and Mimi, Bob, myself, heard about it, and moved by the Spirit, we joined with George and Jack. and we had a fantastic experience. It was just absolutely amazing. So, long story short, we get back from Bethlehem, various places. Steve and Mimi, I think you stayed in Palestine for like 6 months more. And Bob, I think you went back pretty soon after. No, you went up to.
Well, I went through Germany.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of peace action happening up there because of the um, introduction of the U.S. Intermediate range nuclear forces. And for myself, within a few days, I went back to my parents' house in Spokane and found out that they were just restarting the Purex plant, the plutonium factory at Hanford, to make new plutonium for Reagan's nuclear weapons buildup. And over the next few months, I started asking questions. I got involved with other people in Spokane who were asking similar kinds of questions. What is Hanford? What are they doing? Is it a danger to us in Spokane? And we formed a citizens group a few months later that was served as a watchdog on Hanford and was insistent that not only one, that we had access to relevant information, but also a meaningful role in the decision-making process about Hanford. And through like Bob Alvarez, who was at that time with the Environmental Policy Institute. Bob just died in the past year, lived in Tacoma Park. And he taught me how to file a Freedom of Information Act request. And so we organized politically, but also through the FOIA. And about a year and a half later, the Department of Energy released 19,000 pages of declassified documents about the history of Hanford. We had thought that we would find a few accidents, maybe on the same scale as 3 Mile Island. But what we found absolutely shocked us. Huge radiation releases. And they weren't accidents. The plants were operating as designed. There weren't equipment failures. For the first 3 years, there was no filters on the stacks. So there were huge radiation releases.
What years was that?
So most of the atmospheric releases were in the first 10 years. So 45 to 55. And then there was also 9 plutonium production reactors along the Columbia. And they weren't like commercial reactors that have 2 cooling loops, one isolating from the other so that there wouldn't be a transfer of radiation. At Hanford, they pulled the water out of the Columbia, ran it through the core of the reactor, and there was a number of radionuclides that were activated and then discharged back into the Columbia. So during the late 50s and early 60s, the Columbia River was the most contaminated river outside of the former Soviet Union. And they knew about it. They knew that they were releasing dangerous radiation into both the air and the water. Herb Parker was the chief health protection officer. He wrote a memo suggesting that they ban public fishing for a large stretch of the Columbia downstream from Hanford, but he was overruled by the Atomic Energy Commission. Earlier, with the material that went into the air, it was primarily a radioisotope of iodine, which concentrates in people's thyroids. They knew in 1945 that the primary way of exposure is through contaminated milk. They also knew that people could add iodized salt to their diet. It wouldn't be totally protective, but it would significantly reduce the exposures to people's thyroids, because if your thyroid is saturated with natural iodine, it's not going to pick up the radioactive iodine. Did they tell anybody? No. They kept quiet. It wasn't until the first documents were released that we even knew about the radiation exposures. It took me, I can't remember how many years, but other years, I spent about 20 years full-time investigating Hanford. It took me much of that time to figure out how much they knew and when they knew it, and that they, basically hid behind a curtain of secrecy. Um, and So that's part 2 of the book, is about my involvement on Hanford issues. The takeaways of both the pilgrimage and my time with Hanford is that citizens can organize and insert themselves into very important issues, even involving national security, even involving classified information, and inserting ourselves, insisting that we as citizens have a role to play, but we need adequate information and access to the decision-making process. And how important it is for individual people to come together in small groups in community, and take on even, the kind of the paramount thing of national security is the manufacture of nuclear weapons. So that's, to me, is the takeaway is not to be intimidated, and to insist on our rights as citizens. So thank you, and I hope maybe Stephen, Mimi, Bob, you guys want to say anything, or yeah.
Were you able to document any health impacts from these releases?
So the question is whether or not I was able to document any health effects from the exposures to radiation. That is a very complicated process, and it was made very difficult because the government had kept things secret for more than 40 years. And the government, the Department of Energy, paid for one of its longtime Hanford contractors to do a dose reconstruction study that would basically reconstruct the where the material went, how it, especially with iodine, how it got into people's milk, and what the exposures were. There was also a thyroid disease study that was conducted by the Centers for Disease Control. And I represented environmental organizations in the Northwest on that advisory committee. The problem was number one, the government controlled the studies. We weren't able to get independent researchers to conduct them. But even if that was, the the having trying to conduct science 40 years after these major exposures was just fraught with difficulty. You have to bound the uncertainty of various components that go into these calculations, and I for one think that the wide range of uncertainty made the studies inconclusive. The Hanford and the Centers for Disease Control put a spin on the results and said that there was no evidence of any effect. But I think it was that it was, the government kind of putting its thumb on one side of the answer that it wanted, as opposed to being honest with the people who were exposed. And there's been efforts by the downwinder community. But again, the downwinder community was very dispersed by the time the documents were made public. People moved, especially after World War II. And so there weren't homogeneous farming communities in the downwind area 40 years after. A lot of people had moved away, some to California. They didn't it took some years before they found out that they were exposed. And I would think that at least a third of the people who were exposed still don't have any idea of the findings or even the news about it. And it also, most of the downwinders were sick with cancer or other diseases. I served as a paralegal for the downwinder litigation for 10 years, talking to hundreds and hundreds of downwinders. So I know how sick they were, and trying to organize across multiple states when you don't really have any resources, it's just an awful situation. Yeah.
So there was no compensation ever, Jim?
So we did. The attorneys for the plaintiffs, the downwinders, did file suit in 1990. I joined the litigation in about 97. The first trial was held in Spokane in 2005. We won on a couple of thyroid cancer cases, lost on one, and the thyroid disease cases we didn't win at all. The litigation dragged on for another 10 years to 2015. People got settlements that were just really pennies on the damages. Didn't even come close to even paying their medical expenses, let alone compensating them for the pain and the suffering and the violation by their own government, of their bodily integrity. So it's a and some of you may have heard the reauthorization and expansion of RECA, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, that was passed. Probably the only one good thing about the big bad beautiful or big bad bill was the expansion of RECA, and it included a lot more uranium miners. It included people in New Mexico. It included other counties in northern Utah, a small community in St. Louis that had and still is dealing with contamination from the Manhattan Project had tendrils all over the place. They expanded it to Idaho, that received significant fallout from the Nevada test site. But so did Montana, where I was born in 1954. And my sister has suffered from thyroid disease all her life. But Montana was not included in the expansion, nor was Hanford. It's just, we still, I maintain that the only just thing, because I don't think the government would ever offer any kind of compensation. The only just thing is to have universal health insurance in the United States, to at least, for the people exposed could get health care. Yes.
One is, I think, my brother, personal thing, my brother was 3 when he lived in New York. And I have heard that radiation release from the nuclear eastward. New York brings rainfall, so a lot of very involved in the nuclear power. And now they're ramping up. And then the other, now,
Yes. Yeah.
So I was wondering if
Yeah. So I'll start with Archbishop Hunthausen. So Jack worked closely with Archbishop Hunthausen before the walk.
Say who Jack was again?
Jack Morris was the co-founder of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and the guy who had the idea of walking to Bethlehem for peace. And Archbishop Hunthausen was one of the ones at our initial steps. He walked the first 6 miles with us on Good Friday of 1982 as we left the gates of the Trident submarine base. That's just across Puget Sound from Seattle. And he was one of our early endorsers. So I don't think any of us pilgrims really knew him well, but so we did know him, and it was one of the treasures of our pilgrimage. As far as nuclear power, first of all, about your brother, the weapons fallout, both from the Nevada tests, but also from the Marshall Islands, other South Pacific tests, certainly from the tests from Russia. That fallout would circle the globe several times. The most serious was the first pass. And there was, rain out events, not just over Idaho and Montana, but other places, including New York. There were several hot spots that scientists detected of radiation fallout in New York. And there was also contamination of straw in the Midwest. Now you're going to say, straw. Kodak, the film company, used to pack its film with straw. And Kodak noticed the fogging of its film just after the first Nevada tests in, 50, 51. And Kodak made inquiries with the Atomic Energy Commission, and through those negotiations, ever after got advance warning of when a test would be happening, so that it could manage its film stocks and protect its film. And the Atomic Energy Commission never gave advance warning to American parents for them to protect their children. Just the it just really aggravates me.
Say how radiation got into milk.
Well, it would fall out on the pasture grass, and the cows would eat the pasture, and the cows would ingest it, and not just ingest it, but with iodine, the cows would bioconcentrate that in their milk, and so kids were, unwittingly drinking contaminated milk at the same time when, milk in the 50s and 60s was wholeheartedly embraced as part of a healthy diet, build strong bones and teeth, but parents had no idea that they were actually poisoning their kids. As far as nuclear power goes, we're in a really difficult situation, because through decades of burning coal, without any concern, both in this country and around the world, we have got ourselves into a real pickle with climate change. At the same time, when our energy consumption, especially with data centers and other things with our internet and AI, is mushrooming. And so there's, I think it's Microsoft that is working on restarting one of the undamaged reactors at 3 Mile Island for power production. Other companies are touting these so-called modular nuclear reactors that are supposedly safe, inherently so. I've never seen nuclear technology as inherently safe. You look at not just Chernobyl and not just at 3 Mile Island, but also Fukushima, that was heavily damaged by that tsunami and earthquake. And these accidents are not over. Those sites have to be carefully managed for thousands of years from now, so that the fuel doesn't dry out and start to be basically a new nuclear reactor. And then on top of that, there is no solution for the permanent disposal of the spent fuel, of the waste. Kind of a side note, the chemistry of the fuel elements in these modular reactors is chemically incompatible with the spent fuel from commercial light water reactors. And so they couldn't go in the same repository. So not only can't we develop one repository, if we go with these modular reactors, we have to develop 2 repositories. And yeah, it's just, I think we would be well served, even though it would be painful and a sacrifice, is to curb our electrical consumption. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Brian McLaughlin, Divine Word Missionaries. I live in Iowa, where I teach. I'm curious about the physical act of walking, of being on a pilgrimage, and how that physicality contributed to what you were doing, to the to the spirit of the actions that you were taking when you visited these different places. Would you be able to kind of speak to the spirituality of that.
Yeah, great question. So I was a conservative kind of person. Well, I not just personality wise, but politically too. I voted for Reagan in 1980. But I was also not very much a risk taker. Um, and so I was very enthralled with the pilgrimage idea, but I wanted to play it safe. And so I planned to stay behind in Seattle and be the home base coordinator. So I would answer the answering machine and forward the mail and take care of the bank account in Seattle while the pilgrims were out on the road. Then Good Friday happened, and we took the first steps toward Bethlehem. I found it absolutely exhilarating of putting my body in line with my prayer and my heart. I describe it like it's hard to really grasp a good analogy, but in the book I describe it as like when a batter hits the baseball and it just shoots off the bat. You can hit it in the right sweet spot and it sails over the home, the home for a home run. That's what it was that feeling of exhilaration was that first day, that first 6 miles. And I because of my volunteer commitment, I didn't join them until August, and when we got to Kansas, I joined the walking. So I missed the walking the first part of the United States, but yeah, and parts of it were hard. Um, Pretty much everybody experienced kind of a break-in on the exertion of walking 15 to 20 miles a day, 6 days a week. And, you know, blisters, muscle tone sharpening up. Um, but for me, it was hard uh, because I yearned for the comfort of home. Why can't I just go back to Seattle and work for disarmament there? Um, but I had a sense. I heard, that still small voice whispering in the depths of my heart, "No, Jim, this is where I want you. This is what I want you to endure." Um, and by the love of my fellow pilgrims and the generosity of all the strangers we met, every single day, gracing us with food and enthusiasm and encouragement, I stuck it out. And it was, and also examples like, especially George. I mean, here he is in his late 70s or late 60s. He had to retire from being a parish priest in the early 70s because of 2 almost fatal heart attacks. And he had nitroglycerin tablets with him. We didn't know if he was going to have another heart attack on the road. But here he was, gritting it out. He didn't walk, all miles every day, but he got up with the rest of us, got out on the road, and on one of his walking shoes, on the back, he wrote Hiroshima. And on the other one, he wrote Nagasaki. So literally, with every single step he took, he was atoning for what he had done or felt he was responsible for in some way during World War II. And it was his example of tenacity, his example of faithfulness, that, you know, encouraged me. And it was because of spending all of those miles on the road, getting back up every day, that I learned perseverance. And that stood me well with my Hanford investigations. Because it wasn't just that first 19,000 pages of documents, about 5 feet high. But I turned around and filed a Freedom of Information Act on the references in those 19,000 pages, and within 6 months got another 20,000 pages. And you know, I've probably reviewed several 100,000 pages of Hanford documents over my career. But always uh, striving for the truth. And especially with things like nuclear weapons, it's hard to get there. And there are still secrets out there for young people, encouraging history students and science students to keep pressing on. So, yeah. Yeah.
For me, and I think for almost all of us, I think for all of us, a part of it was we didn't know what to do. You know, the magnitude of it's still here, and but a number of us had committed civil disobedience, and yeah, I had the privilege of working with Jack in the social justice office in Seattle, and we had Archbishop Hunthausen as our bishop. It's like, you know, well, at least we're in the right diocese, we felt. But everybody had a sense of the overwhelmingness of the whole thing. Even those like George, who had been so involved in the civil rights movement and whatnot, and Jack was very involved in the peace movement, and the rest of us were in varying places of being exposed to what was happening, because we were the core of us that started were in Seattle, and we were familiar with Ground Zero, and we had been out to Ground Zero. So the thing that the walking did and the pilgrimage did is, I don't know what to do, but when you go to do the walk, you gave it all. You had to give it all. So I think that was the spirituality of it. Was nobody dreamed that doing a walk was gonna, you know, like convince Ronald Reagan to take a different policy direction. But it's like we didn't know what would really do that. And so we were really demonstrating to ourselves and to others that, you know, you need to do something like all consuming as a way to focus on this thing that was kind of all consuming us.
Reminds me of Gandhi's act of spinning. You know, it seems simple in name, but it was an action that he could take that had, you know, a profound effect, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's quite incredible.
And the other thing, and I'll get back over here, the power of prayer. Never underestimate the power of prayer. You know, we walked in 82 and 83, a couple of the darkest years of the Cold War. And I think that through our efforts on the pilgrimage and through the efforts of so many people around the world praying for peace, it wasn't luck. It was God, you know, helping people, helping each other through prayer. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Alves. I'm a communications coordinator and peace coach with Little Friends for Peace via the Franciscan Mission Service. I was a journalism student at Virginia Tech, and this part about Kodak was so interesting. And as a major fan of the movie Oppenheimer, noting that Christopher Nolan worked with Kodak to make an so that they could shoot the IMAX film print in black and white, and that the black and white scenes were showing a perspective of the Atomic Energy Commission meetings, and how that is like a crazy I don't know, twist of fate or something absurd there. But I'm curious as a if what your background was, if you had any journalism or English background, or if this was like a new adventure, what sort of the process of looking through those documents, if it was like there's a summary and it said all the major findings, or if like the major bombshells were just buried throughout, and if there were similar efforts for investigation that you've been in contact with around the country for other plants.
So my undergraduate degree is in broadcasting and theater from Gonzaga. After the pilgrimage, I was working. My day job, which was only half time, was peace and justice coordinator for the Diocese of Spokane, and I started a master's in religious studies. And through that, I learned hermeneutics of how to properly read a historical document, whether it's scripture 2,000 years before or whether it's 50, 60 years before. And these documents, they were, most of them initially were environmental monitoring reports, and they were very dry. Some of them were pages and pages of tables or maps of plumes of radiation being measured in the environment. It took me so long to figure out. I mean, Bob Alvarez and others like Bert Franke of Germany were very helpful. Arjun Makajani, whose office I think is still in downtown Tacoma Park, they were helpful, but nobody had really done work on Hanford's document trail, and it just just like it takes a while to figure out who the important people are, what their positions are, who they're interrelating with, where the documents are. I mean, Oak Ridge was kind of the administrative center of the Manhattan Project, and a lot of Oak Ridge documents are down at the National Archive in Atlanta. Hanford was part of the monitoring network of fallout from the Nevada test site. And so a lot of Hanford documents ended up at a repository in Las Vegas. And so it just painstakingly, basically putting a jigsaw puzzle together without looking at the picture.
We have time for one more question.
Jim, I'm Art Laffin from the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker here with Kathy too. Thank you so much for your book and for your witness, and to all of you who did that great pilgrimage. At the time, I was preparing for the Trident 9 Plowshares action, and then was in prison during your walk and pilgrimage. And it seemed to us at the time, how could things get worse? And look at where we are now. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists put the doomsday clock at 89 seconds to midnight. And this is the reality we've been living with all these years, right? And so I just wonder, what your sense of things are right now regarding the convergence of movements with the environmental movement, with the uh, nuclear disarmament movement, um, the peace and justice movement, the wider movement around the world to really come to terms with the reality that we're living with every moment of our existence. I was also wondering if you could comment on, because some of our young people here wouldn't know anything about the Ground Zero community and the life and witness work of Jim and Shelley Douglas, who I know were part of your inner and outer circle during the whole time of the pilgrimage. So thank you.
And that was one of the things I did also after the pilgrimage, was help Jim with tracking the white train through Spokane. I think and looking at the time, I'll talk to you afterwards about Ground Zero. But with these movements, with the fact that we've got all of the nuclear armed countries adding to their arsenals, increasing the international tensions, decreasing of democracy, and then we have this other existential threat of climate change. I don't know how we put that all together. I think it's beyond any one of us or any one organization. I think that each of us needs to be both humble, because we can't do it all. No one of us can do it all, and to accept that limitation. But then also through prayer and our emotions is to pour our heart into it and to discern how God and the Spirit are moving our hearts. For some of us, I don't see the person who was here from the downstairs, the mobilizing, the death penalty. For some, that has to end, needs to end. For others, it's immigration. For others, it's Gaza and the West Bank, what's happening there. For me, it's going to remain nuclear disarmament. But knowing through prayer how we are united in this whole effort, because our hearts are beating in love, that we have to have faith in that, to say, please God, let my contribution help. And I think as we continue to reach out in community, always taking care of our inner spiritual work to maintain that approach of love to other people. I mean, that's one of the other things that, and this will be my final point, that we kind of stumbled on through walking across 10 different countries is, and receiving hospitality from total strangers for 20 months, is the amazing individuality of our differences, but also amazed at how united, how much in common we have with each of us. There's now, over 7 billion of us alive on the planet, and no one of us is like another. Even identical twins, they're different. Each one of those 7 or 8 billion people is a unique manifestation of God's creative love. Wow. Wow. If we meditate on that each day and see the miracle of our interactions with each person, that is the power of nonviolence. That is the power that will revolutionize the earth.
Thank you. Let's give him a hand. Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much. And you have to take your opportunity for a commercial announcement. So how can we get your book? Where can we get your book?
So on the table, there's my card, and on the back has my website, and there's a link, or any of your favorite bookstores. They can all order it for you. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, great. Christmas is coming, birthdays, special occasions. But you really will enjoy it. And that is, we were talking earlier about the spiritual nature of the experiences that are also communicated in the first part of the book. It is great to meditate with. It is great to stop and think about our own respective journeys of faith and the crises that we encounter, especially in these times, because they're bringing them to the rise. Yes. And how do we persevere? As you said, what is the thing that it just clicks with you and you're like, okay, no matter what, God, whatever you say. And so, that is what's so wonderful also about your book, that it has so many ways to reach us, to fill us, to inform us. So thank you so much for saying yes to God for that. And we are going to also raise up our voices to God as we end this wonderful session. Thank you for all of you who have joined us on the live stream and here in person. We're going to pray this prayer for nuclear disarmament as our closing. And so if we can begin together. Good and gracious God, we pray for a world free of nuclear weapons. Lift the fog of atomic darkness that hovers so pervasively over the earth. We pray the world leaders to come and that more weapons and war do not bring peace. May financial resources be allocated to alleviate poverty, support food security, housing, health care, environment, and educational programs. Good and gracious God, we pray that the deadly power of nuclear weapons never again be unleashed on people and your creation. May such weapons of mass and indiscriminate annihilations be forever banned and eliminated from the face of the earth. Good and gracious God, forgive our past silence. Give us the courage and strength to tirelessly raise our prophetic voices to work to eliminate weapons of mass destruction. Let us remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki as beacons, as commit ourselves to find ways to live together in peace, that we may not be just peace lovers, but peacemakers. Amen. Let's give Jim one more round of applause. Thank you so much.